A Flash in the Dark, Chapter 34 Healing. Batman pulled into the temporary Batcave he had set up just outside of Central, the tires on the Batmobile smoking. He had to hurry. There were few people who survived the Ground Zero explosion of a fear toxin canister. It should have killed her by now. But he could help her if he hurried. At least, he hoped. She had stopped moving, but according to the sensors in the Batmobile, she was still alive, if only just. The occasional low keen of fear was the only thing keeping him hopeful at the moment. He scooped her up and set her down on the medical table. She was starting to shake again, but no, it wasn't quite shaking. It was a vibration. So fast his eye could barely track it. It was starting to make her body blur. It made it a bit difficult to draw blood, but after a few tries he managed it. He swore when he took a look under the microscope. He pulled down his cowl, knowing that there was no way she could see anything beyond the hallucinations she was trapped in. "How the hell are you still alive?" he muttered as he went back to the microscope. SWAT entered the building first via the large hole in the side of it. Moments later, they signaled the all clear. Captain Singh might have thought the whole call was a prank if it hadn't been for the large hole in the building and the fact that West still couldn't get a hold of Barry. He, Thawne, and West entered the building and found a peculiar sight. 4 figures, all in tattered clothes, were tied up, their weapons far out of reach of any of them. All of them were badly bruised or bleeding. The scientists were all gathered in the corner. West put away his gun and Thawne followed his lead. "What happened here?" Thawne asked. One of the shaking scientists stepped forward. Scarecrow! He broke in. Wanted the radon we keep at this facility. Mr. Wayne and the girl that was with him, she tried to talk to him, but he threatened Mr. Wayne and she pushed him out of the way. She got hit. Canister right at her feet. Security must have gotten Wayne out, but then he showed up. The scientist's eyes were wide and he was shaking from head to toe. Eddie had to sit him down. "Who?" the detective asked. The scientist shook his head, letting Eddie guide him into one of the not overturned desk chairs. "Batman! In Central City! I moved to get away from this craziness!" The scientist was practically in tears, but Joe knelt down in front of him. "What happened? We need to know where the girl went. If she's hurt, we're on a short time frame." He looked like he was trying to keep his cool. The scientist put his head in his hands. "He took her," the scientist muttered. Joe and Eddie both froze. "Who took her?" they asked almost in unison. The scientist looked up and gestured around. "Batman! He came in, beat the shit out of Scarecrow and his goons, and then he scooped up the girl Mr. Wayne was with. He took her with her," he babbled. Joe went pale and Eddie swore. Captain Singh was already on the phone. "I want traffic cameras searching for Barry Allen. She's been kidnapped. Get a picture of her out to every beat cop we've got. We need to find her, and fast," he demanded. One of the men tied up on the ground laughed before wincing in pain. "You'll be too late," he managed before spitting out a tooth. Joe nearly snarled, and Eddie had to hold him back. Captain Singh held his composure better, though. "The hell are you talking about, scumbag?" the captain demanded, hand on his sidearm. The man laughed again, coughing up a tiny amount of blood onto the dusty floor. "My new fear toxin is deadly with mass exposure. She was ground zero when the canister blew. Even Batman shouldn't be able to save her. Shame. She was pretty screaming on the floor like that." The Scarecrow laughed loudly. Eddie had to drag Joe out of the room. Bruce tried the antidote 3 times before it did anything even remotely coming close to helpful. Reality seemed to finally be mixing with her hallucinations. Bruce had pulled his cowl back up, which was good, for her bloodshot eyes zeroed in on him, confusion in their hazel depths. Who are you?" she muttered, looking confused, as though she still wasn't quite sure what reality was. Her voice was hoarse from screaming. "That's not important. You've been poisoned by a fear toxin. Most of what you're seeing isn't real, Miss Allen. You need to get the toxin out of your system as quickly as possible. The dose you were given would have killed a normal human." He had his voice-altering device hooked up into his suit, so he spoke, feeling sure she wouldn't recognize his voice. Barry groaned as she tried to move. She managed to twitch a finger. Can't move, she choked out. Bruce nodded under his cowl. But you can still vibrate, Flash. Theoretically, if you vibrate fast enough, you can work the toxin out of your body. If you want to live, you need to vibrate it out of your system now, he instructed. Barry tried to nod but couldn't manage it. But he was right, she was vibrating. She willed herself to vibrate faster. He watched as Barry blurred on the table. A small mist surrounded her as she did. It was brown, like the liquid version of the toxin. The sensors in the temporary Batcave read the mist as an inert form of the toxin. Barry gasped as she stopped moving, and the man in yellow faded fully from view, replaced with a man dressed from head to toe in black. She stared for a moment before she realized what she was looking at. When she did, she scrambled backward in shock and fell off what appeared to be a metal table. She landed hard on a stone floor, swearing as pain lanced up her elbow where she'd landed. They were in what appeared to be a cave. Barry was beyond confused. The last thing she remembered was pushing Bruce Wayne out of the way as the Scarecrow fired at him. Now a figure straight out of an urban legend was standing in front of her. Batman? She stammered. How? The man nodded. Barry continued to stare. How? What? You're real? The cowl didn't show much emotion, but Barry could almost see his eyebrow rise. Then he spoke again. His voice was distorted. I am real. Flash. He waited for that to sink in. He knew it had when her eyes widened. How did you know that? She asked, struggling back to her feet. Too few survived the ground zero explosion of a canister of fear toxin. Anyone else would have died nearly an hour ago. That, and you were vibrating most of the way here. Why did you bring me here? You were dying. I don't let people die if I can avoid it. He stated. Barry nodded, but Batman continued. My interest was in the Flash. And the fact that everyone you go up against has either disappeared or ended up 6 feet under. Barry looked up indignantly. Okay, the ones that ended up dying were not my fault. I tried to save them. And the others are somewhere. They can't hurt anyone else. The police can't hold people like that, not even in Iron Heights. She snapped at him. Batman nodded. Barry's was an easy face to read. She wasn't lying to him. She looked wiped out. Her hair was a mess, strands of the long mass sticking to her face, which was covered in a sheen of sweat. He stepped forward, helping her all the way to her feet. All right then, Miss Allen. I believe our business is done. Perhaps it was a bit of dirty pool to tranquilize her, but he needed to be able to get her out of here without her figuring anything out. She barely noticed the needle, but the 5,000 milligrams of horse tranquilizer did to her what it had done to Bane a few weeks ago, though she slipped out of consciousness without nearly as much of a fight. He scooped her off her feet and carried her back over to the Batmobile. He would get her back home, though it might take a bit more effort here in Central.